Maybe Becky when they're back in the corner.
I know where you said. Does she have one then? No.
I didn't know somebody was here.
So the sheet I passed out where I have a page number referred to is out of the leaders section, so I didn't want you to think I was clever enough to make up some of those phrases myself. But the rest of it's mine. You want to start with questions? This is not real complicated, but spiritually it's challenging. So, what questions did you have?
Okay, I wouldn't know.
None? Okay. Well, I thought we'd start with an offering. No, I'm just seeing if you're awake. I'm sorry, you can take the boy out of Missouri, but you can't take the Missouri out of the boy, you know? The sheet I put together kind of reflects the lessons that you did and some of my thoughts. I started with the good and the bad of money. We probably all have experienced that. We seem to favor capitalism in America, but can capitalism be brutal at times?
Absolutely.
Why would it be brutal? I use that word very specifically.
Depends on, like the leadership of the company. It's all about whether they value their people, whether they value their community, or whether they're just interested in making a profit. And this is what we're going to do, and we don't care about the people that get hurt in the process.
Yeah. And capitalism rewards producing, for sure. Not a lot of compassion in the economic system. That would somehow have to come from people that are in leadership.
I think well, you in capitalism, you underlying that is this idea that if you work hard, then you have what you need. So then there's this implication that if you don't have what you need, you didn't work hard. So that it's easy to lose the compassion because you start thinking only in terms of, well, I'm working hard for me. If they want something, they should work hard for them. And you can apply that in places that it just isn't fair.
That's very true. And, sometimes it's easier to judge than to understand. I like capitalism. I call it the free market system, and I didn't make that up. I learned it myself. I learned it from somebody else. Back in Missouri, the Missouri Chamber of Commerce had a program where if a businessman from the community wanted to recommend you, they would send you to a conference. So there were 50 at a time clergy that would come, be paid, their expenses were paid by the businessman in the community who recommended you and so on. And I got to go one time and it was really fascinating because they talked about it as the free market system, which I kind of like that because it means that, if I want to do something, I can try and do it. And if I succeed, great. And if I go broke, well, that was my attempt at it. But I liked it. And their purpose, I think, was because I came out of a generation where every pastor thought they knew how to preach economics from the pulpit. And it wasn't pretty, and it wasn't good, and it wasn't even scriptural. So the Missouri Chamber of Commerce decided they were going to give clergy an opportunity to learn about the free market system in America. We had profs from Purdue and other universities that came in and lectured. And I learned two things. One is if you tweak something over here, you're going to have a ripple effect over here in the economy. It's not nearly as simple as we think it is. And the other thing is that it's really complex how we deal with our culture from just an economic viewpoint. And I came away thinking I have no business ever teaching anything about economics. So that's kind of why I went. The interesting point was it because it was people from all different denominations, clergy from all different denominations. Every time we had the noon prayer for lunch, they were very short because nobody wanted to say anything that would offend anybody. And we sort of joked about that. But the reason I start with that is because obviously my main point here is the problem is not money. It's how we understand a lot of things. If you don't have any questions, I'm going to kind of walk through this a little bit.
I came up with a question.
Good. I was going to say, where's the Sarah we know?
So sometimes and I don't know if this is right or not, so this is my question, because I think it might not be right. Sometimes I think I hear.
Well, you're giving me an escape clause right over there.
Well, I read the things that talk about being generous in the Bible. And you should give this percentage to the poor, and you should do this for widows, and all these kinds of things. And I think it's easy to think, well, our system is so different than theirs was. Our system is so much more complicated than theirs was. Our social services are so different. Everything is just so different that it almost it can't apply the same way. You know, they said you should give all this money to the poor, but in America we have all these social services, so it's different. Do you think, is it that different? I mean, the complexity of the economy that we're in now compared to what they had, or is that just a way out of being generous?
It might be more complex, but I think there are many, many ways that people fall through the cracks. And we still need to have a concern for that, which is why we started neighborhood ministry at North. It came from Herb Reese, fell out of California, or out of Colorado, who basically went through a whole bunch of Bible studies about helping the widow and the poor. It was really fascinating. But the task, if we do it as a church, shouldn't be about money as much as about loving people and raising them up. Because a lot of people get stuck and don't know how to get out. One of the things we do, we go in and we fix things. And by the way, I would never start another ministry next to a mobile home park. Not because there's anything bad about it, except they're really hard to fix. Some of them, you know, much more. But anyway, the point is we go in and do hands-on stuff, and our purpose is to get to know them and let them know we care. And we've had members join the church, not so much because we gave a handout to them, but because we worked with them and helped them. And our standard answer is, if they come wanting some kind of money to help pay a bill or something, then our answer is, if you want to invite us into that area of your life, we will be glad to work with you, but that means we want to go through a budget with you. Right. And that's a prerequisite. We're not trying to be hard-nosed, but we realize there can be a lot of complications. And, you know, I had one person tell me, you know, well, I don't do budgets. You know, I see money and I spend it. I go, well, good luck. You know, then we realize we're at a point where we can't really help that person. So we've had different people work with people with budgets. And it's been, I'll give you an example. I won't tell the person who was helped, but last year I was talking to this person and I said, how did you finally get all this figured out and learn how to do this? Because when she first started coming to the church, she didn't have things in order. And her answer was, Eileen Hill taught me how to do this. Because I didn't learn it growing up. And I thought, that was probably the most encouraging thing I could have heard. That we were making a difference in not just day to day or week to week, but in a life-changing way of how to survive. Government doesn't do that. Government's more law. You do this and you get that, blah, 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 but it's nuts and bolts and there's not a lot of care for the person of it. It's just administering funds. Now, that's my perception.
Well,
You don't have to agree with that.
Yeah. it's-
So am I answering your question or not?
Yeah.
Not really. I
Well,
sidestepped
no,
it.
Not really.
No.
Well,
But
it's
it's
like teaching a person to fish so that they can provide for themselves, rather than just giving them the fish and saying, okay, you're done.
Well, and it's interesting because I think a lot of times Christians, or I guess I should only speak for myself, don't want to give because I don't want to be taken advantage of.
Oh, sure.
But that kind of giving where it's a relationship kind of, you're not just throwing money out, you're trying to make relationship with people.
The other thing I've done when I lived in a town down in Lake of the Ozarks, we got together with the 10 churches in town and agreed that if we were going to help somebody, before we would help them, we had them go to the sheriff's department, and the sheriff's department would issue them a card. And then the names of the churches that were participating were on that card, and they could go to any of the churches. And so anyway, they couldn't go back and get another card. And it was kind of interesting. About 1 out of every 20 people, they kept them because they were wanted in another state. So they went to get a card, and they ended up being a guest a lot longer than they wanted. So that helped us feel a lot better about what we were doing. But the other thing was they couldn't go from church to church. And so we had one lady come and, I said, well, you have to go to the sheriff's department. Well, I did that, and they sent me to the Methodist. I went to the Methodist church, and I said, oh. And her answer was, well, I wasn't going to take their money because they wanted me to help rake leaves. And I thought, well, that's interesting. So they wanted her to kind of feel a part of what they were doing to help her and make a connection. And now you got to shut me up because I can talk on this forever. And I thought it was interesting. Her perception was she shouldn't have to do anything. And so by really caring, we had a group of kids vandalize a church van down in the Ozarks, and we found out who they were. And in working with the juvenile officer, instead of having them pay for the damage on the van, we worked out with the juvenile officer, and in a way we couldn't be sued, that they had to do work. Because otherwise, we knew their parents would pay, and then we haven't accomplished anything. So they cleaned the van, and John Carlton, who was in charge of the bus ministry, he had them cleaning the floor with a toothbrush. But you know what? It was kind of cool because when it was all done, we could say to them, we forgive you, and thank you for doing this. And we want to be your friends. We don't want to be your enemies. And they felt like they really had learned something through it. I thought it was kind of neat. So going back to your question, I think in some ways it's not a whole lot different, but the difference is our government is so complicated. I don't know if people's lives are any more complicated, but our government, the way it handles things is much more complicated.
Well, it's interesting to think about just kind of what you talk about with that real personal connection.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's so impersonal. I know that some of the money that I give goes, you give money at Walmart, or you give money at, through your taxes, or you give money, all these different, even at church.
Mm-hmm.
But I never see the people that money goes to. So it's a really impersonal, I mean, it's still generous. It's still a good thing to do, but I wonder if that changes how you think about it.
Oh, I think it does immensely. It's changed, working with people rather than just giving things to people, has helped me really understand much better. And there was a program out, and they're running a review of it again, Bridges Out of Poverty. It's done by the group out of Rockford. It used to be Love in the Name of Christ, and now it's One Body Collaborative. And they sponsor, it's a nationwide program, but they sponsor bringing it here. And it was a Zoom meeting last year, Bridges Out of Poverty. And it really helped me understand even more the difficulties about being poor. Because, for example, they illustrated your car breaks down and you don't have money to fix it. And now you can't get to work. And it's just so many things kind of intertwined. So to me, the whole key about being generous, somewhere along the line, as difficult as it is and as painful as it is, has to include the church giving its time as well. And I like, the quote out of the book, money is congealed sweat and blood. I like that. And I think what we do for people needs to portray that, So
I have a comment.
we've actually tried to teach people. Hang on just a minute before I forget, because your memory's better than mine. We tried to teach a person how to stain their deck. Bill Martin, remember him? Yeah, great painter. And it's funny, but it's kind of cool in a way, because this person really learned something. So Bill taught him how to stain the deck. We built a ramp for his wife who had MS and couldn't walk very well. And so then we thought he can stain it. So Bill taught him how to stain, showed him and everything. And then he goes, whatever you do not open a can of stain or paint in the house. Guess what happened? On the kitchen counter, he opened this can of stain. And he dropped it. And it took him a long, long time to clean it up. But you know what? He never did it again. So I think there's really something to working with people and getting down with them in their difficulty rather than just doling out money. I think giving of our time is even more valuable than all that money. So the problem isn't with money. It's really about how we use it and how we even help other people with it. Yes, I'm
Well,
sorry.
I just want to make this comment because it's impressed me so much that we had this man who was Christian, and he fixed our car for many years and did our maintenance and all that. He moved the business, but since then. But we found out, not because he tooted his horn about it or anything, but we inadvertently found out that he had, I think it was Tuesday evenings, he took people and fixed their cars that couldn't get to work. And all just free. And then I found out like maybe a year ago that my dentist does the same thing. He does people, and I know of a gal that said, I have a lot of work Dr. Rooney's gonna help me with, and he said, look, if you have a problem with this, I'll do the work for you, I'll help you out. And I just am so impressed when people do that. They don't toot their horn about it or make a display, but they give to people that need it with no payment. So I bet there's a lot of people in our community that we don't even know that do things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, I like this phrase, money is a congealed sweat and blood. I mean, that's really, and they're giving of money because time is money. Their blood and sweat and tears and toil or whatever that goes into it is worth something. And to give of that, and then we get to work with people, not just keep them at a distance. I did have a guy one time, this is back in the Ozarks again, he came through, he was on his way to Springfield and Missouri and stunk, urine smell, horrible, just horrible. And anyway, he wouldn't go down to the sheriff's department. And it was the old thing, well, I'm on my way to get a job and blah, blah, I've heard this story so many times, there's about X number of variations of it. But anyway, we decided that because he wouldn't cooperate and do anything, we couldn't help him. So he about 6 months later, he came back with the same clothes and the same story. And I said, you don't remember me, do you? He goes, no. I said, you realize that you were here about 6 months ago? Oh, no, I wasn't. I said, well, let me tell you how the rest of the story goes. And I repeated what he told me 6 months ago, and he bolted. So I think helping people is complicated, and so how we use our money matters, and how we use our time matters. We can't get everything always right, we don't, but.
I've always told all my kids, everything in life is either time or money. You put the time in and you get the money, or you spend the money for the quicker turnaround, like, the shopping apps that they have now, it's a lot more expensive, but then you get it right now. Or you put the hard work in and put your time in and get rewards out of it.
Yeah, that's what you do with your kids?
Yeah,
Oh, that's
everything in
excellent.
life is time and money.
That's excellent. When my son was about 5, he started this thing of, asking for money. And so I said, sure. And we had, Benton County in Missouri, down Lake the Ozarks, had a kind of a reputation for having more rocks than soil. And the whole story was that when God did Colorado in the mountains, he had a few rocks left over and he just dropped them in Benton County. But it literally, every time it rained, it would grow rocks. So there was no end to it. Soil was full of them. So he got $1 a bucket for picking up rocks. He developed a work ethic. I didn't have to teach him to it. He just began to realize that there's a connection between hard work and money.
So where did you put the
I
money?
love it. And the older he, the funny thing is, the older he got, the more leverage I got. So, poor kid couldn't win. But anyway, yeah, I like what you're saying, and I think that's important. If we don't teach our own people that, then how can we teach outsiders? I think it's really important to be compassionate to poor people, but some are not going to be helped and some will. Some, we can change the way they see things and do things, and some we won't be able to. But that's going to be up to them. So, am I sounding like this is depressing? This isn't stuff even on my sheet here, I don't think. You get me started. Let me go through a few things unless you got some more questions. But the clear answer to your question, Sarah, about is it different today than back then? I think the tide is similar, and there's some things that are similar. It was a different community, but I think some of the principles are still the same. So I got money is not good or bad, and so on. I've known wealthy people who are generous and humble, and I've known wealthy people who are just plain too full of themselves. I had grandparents like that. My grandpa on my dad's side was an unbeliever, very wealthy lawyer, prominent. He was chairman of the Michigan Republican Party, but he was not a good man. And then I moved down to Lake the Ozarks, where I started a mission church. And within the first year, there's 3 millionaires in the congregation. This is a little poor Ozark town. One owned a bank, one owned a gun stock factory, and the other one worked at the bank. Wealthy people. The kindest, most non-boastful people I have met. And I'm going, I think God sent me down there just to learn that rich people can be okay. And it changed my whole attitude. Reiner Fajan, he made gun stocks. Sold around the world, Prince of Saudi Arabia, John Glenn, he had a knack for knowing wood, and he figured out a way how to have a 7-point position to adjust a gun stock so people from all over came. And he would buy exotic woods and make these gun stocks. He farm boy that grew up and just knew he had a knack for woodworking. So, but he was like a Sam Walton. He'd drive around in an old rusty El Camino with bib overalls, and just a good man, not full of himself at all. And I'm going, okay, Lord, I think you're teaching me something here. That rich people can really be good people, And so we had a thing where a little we had a problem with the door in the men's restroom. And so, you know, we were gonna spend hundreds of dollars trying to fix it, and no. He went back to his shop and he made for $3.20 a piece of wood that fit and solved the problem. And I'm going, you know, I mean, it taught me something. So the point is, money isn't good or bad. And I think that's really important. It was important for me to understand that.
But I think also the most generous people are people who don't have anything.
That can be true too. And they can also be sometimes the most stingy, but they can be, yes. I got a little note here, if you noticed, down at point F, living in the Ozarks for 16 years, I realized that no matter what level of income you were in, you could still misuse money and boast. I had a 10-inch chainsaw, people laughed at me. I mean, it was really small. You know, you got to be a little bit secure in your masculinity with a 10-inch chainsaw. Not down in the Ozarks. Yeah, I was fine with it. Or the number of guns on your gun rack in your truck. I mean, this is true. On the opposite side of things, some of the people almost bragged about being poor. It was like a badge of honor. I'm tough, I can do this. So I think the attitudes run the whole gamut from rich to poor. So it's not the money, it's about, so it gets us down to how does money manipulate us? Foolishly is letting ourselves be manipulated by money deceives us into thinking that we are in control. And arrogance can lead us to being abusive. These are thoughts out of the book. I just sort of like them. Some of these are answered to questions you did too, I'm sure. Concern over money can bring us to unhealthy conclusions. Listed below are two opposite unhealthy attitudes towards money. These are real life situations. First one, I knew, family in Kansas City decided they were, they were wealthy and they just were going to give away everything they had. And guess what happened? They had to mooch off their friends all the time. So that was not a healthy use of money. You know, if you give it all away and then you got to beg from other people, you haven't accomplished what you really want to accomplish, because then you're not serving, you're putting yourself in need instead of being able to use the money in a good way. And I like Reverend Ike. I don't know if you remember him. He was a televangelist some years back. He was quite wealthy. He was asked what he was doing to stamp out poverty. And his answer, literally, I heard this on a TV interview, I'm doing my part, I'm not poor. True story. So it really is about the attitude, isn't it? You know? Rockefeller, how much is enough? Just a little more was his answer, you know? Now, it made me think perhaps the real question is not how much is enough, but what if the real question is, how much can I handle? Let me jump down to Reinhard Fagen, same guy that had the gun stock factory. Probably about once a month or every 2 months, he'd come in with a question about whether or not he should donate to such and such group that he got a letter from. He got a letter from Oral Roberts. If he donated X amount of money, he would get a key to Reverend Roberts' private prayer chapel. That's kind of manipulation, isn't it? That's encouraging giving for the wrong reason. And I told Reiner, and I said, it probably won't fit anyway, it's the wrong key. But he would come in with these concerns about, was this a legitimate thing he should donate to? Because he had set up a foundation so they could use his money wisely. And I was struck by the burden that this man carried that I didn't. The burden of having to make decisions of how to use his money wisely in giving to charities. I thought, that's a burden I haven't experienced. And I thought, so I thought, the real question is, how much can we handle? Not just, do I need a little more, but how much can I handle wisely? And I'm not sure I've got that figured out. So I'll jump down to Karen and my mom. My mom lived in Florida when that was the big lottery, and they went to the nationwide lottery. And they even would have ads about telling you how terrible the odds were of ever winning. They would have ads on TV down there. But my mom every week would buy a lottery ticket for herself and one for Karen, my first wife. And I would send the ticket then to Karen. So every week she bought 2 lottery tickets and Karen would get one. Of course, she paid her, $10 and she good for 10 weeks then of lottery tickets and so on. And I told Karen, I said, it's not going to do you any good. She goes, why not? I'm praying you don't win. She goes, why would you do that? I said, I don't think we could handle it. I just don't know if we could. I think instant wealth is really hard to cope with, but especially after I saw how Reiner had to deal with the burdens of conscience of how to use the money wisely that he had. And I'm thinking, God's got me at the right point. I can handle what I got. And I'm thrilled that he's given me even more than I ever thought I would have.
Well, there
So,
are people that have won, and
pardon me?
there are people who have won the lottery, and most of the time it ends up, all either misused or, their relationships get all messed up because, some family members think that they should get a share of it, and it just is, ends up not being a good thing for most people.
That's very true. I think instant wealth is very difficult and damaging in some ways. Because unless lifestyles change, you can't accommodate for what you've been blessed with. So otherwise you just, So perspective is everything. I love this one, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. I think I was probably 5 years in the ministry and thought this passage was always, where your heart is, there your treasure will be. And I was in a stewardship campaign one time and realized I had the passage wrong. Now think about this, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Your money's going to follow, your heart's going to follow where your treasure goes, isn't it? We kind of think it's the other way around, but this is a profound statement. And I think what that tells me is be careful where I put my treasures, because my heart just might follow.
Esther, I
Yes.
think if somebody came in here and put a $20 bill in front of each of us, I don't think in an instant we would know what to do with it. I think we would ponder, and we would have to think, I don't need it, but what am I gonna do with this $20 bill? Because that's just how it works there. We have no idea how that $20 bill could impact somebody else's life. But outreach or anything here that any of us would have to ponder the need for that $20 bill.
Oh, I think you're absolutely right.
Well, and can I just say, that's really convicting, because I know what I would do with it. I would take it and I would save it. Like, I gotta keep this, like, I gotta build more, like, and you're right though, I don't need it. Like, my life will not be different with this $20 bill, but my instinct would automatically be like, oh, I better take that. I mean, it's just such a, yeah.
You said that and I immediately thought, I will get coffee and food.
I
I had no hesitation about it. I'm really hungry right now. So you said $20 in front of me, I was like, coffee, food. So maybe I'm not as a pious person as.
That's,
I mean, it's true.
yes, I think you're right. It's, yeah. And that's why it's not the amount of money, it's not the money, it's the fact that, what are we gonna do with this money that God blesses us with? And at first glance, it seems simple, but it's really not.
Yeah.
I know, Pastor, I've shared this a couple times, but when I came back to Emmanuel and I was in charge of putting in the weekly offerings, there was an elderly couple, and they could walk in, I would not even know who they were, but I just loved their envelope. So whenever they won the lottery, there'd be other additional envelope, and it would say 10% lottery winnings. So they made sure, yes, it was like, wherever they did, whatever they did was 10% winnings. It was, they were convicted. It's like, okay, we're gonna tithe with one lesson, and there you go.
But I think that 10% is so much easier when you don't have it.
Oh,
Say if you've got $20, it's only $2. But if you've got $200,000, now you gotta give $20,000.
you're right. And that's the other problem that Reiner had when he was giving his money. He had a lot to give, but it mattered where he put it.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's very true. When I was in full-time ministry, I loved teaching confirmation kids. I just loved it. We had about 30 kids every year, and I just absolutely loved it. And when I taught stewardship, I would tell them, it's not, you're not going to bail God out of a jam, but you get to be a part of what God is doing. And so decide what you want. If you get $1 a week allowance, if you want to give 10% to God, take a dime out of that and give it first. Because what matters the most is whether it's first out of your allowance or at the end. Because if it's the end, you're going to kick and scream. If you give it first, you can give it joyfully. If it's 5 cents, I don't care. If it's 2 cents, it's not about the money. It's about letting God into your allowance first. And I love teaching that part because the kids would kind of go, oh. And I think good stewardship starts early in our Christian faith.
I think too, it's like my paychecks, you would have things deducted, go into a certain account before you even got the money. So it's kind of like that. It's like, you don't miss that. But if you're getting the full amount, now you're going to miss giving that. It's like,
Sure,
if you give it at the beginning, it's gone.
sure. Now here's the real dilemma. Do you give to the Lord before or after taxes? I'm not answering that part. That's an opinion thing, but I just thought I'd complicate the issue. Right. Yes.
What does that mean?
There you go.
So, I want to end with the last one. The real question is, the legacy we leave behind. I think that's more important than anything. People with a lot of money can leave a good legacy or a bad legacy. People with very little money can leave a good legacy or a bad legacy. And I like the way on Legacy Sunday, Pastor Buss had us pass the Bible on to the next generation. But anyway, this next one is about a kid who goes to Sunday school. And Dad picks him up afterwards and said, well, how did you like spending the whole grade? What was your teacher's name? I really don't know. You don't remember your teacher's name? No, but I'm certain she was Jesus' grandmother. Dad goes, why do you think she's Jesus' grandmother? Because she had pictures of him everywhere and she couldn't quit talking about it. Well, think about that. That's a legacy that person was leaving behind for the next generation. And my constant prayer is that I would be as wise to leave that kind of a legacy as well. So, any other comments or questions? Did you have fun with this lesson? Nothing real new in here. Nothing new you haven't heard before.
Could you just explain what you wrote at the top about the pigs?
Yeah, right at the top.
So the side.
Oh, yeah. I forgot to tell you that. Okay. I didn't have my glasses on when I started. So, yes, the word steward comes from an old English word, styward. The styward is the one who's in charge of the pigs. Now, the point of that is, he was simply the caretaker, he wasn't the owner. So the steward is one who realizes that everything we have is on own from God. And I get to take care of it. I'm the styward of the blessings that God has given me. That's where the word steward comes from. That's why I had it up there, because I think it kind of helps shed light on what it really means to be a Christian steward. I don't own it. God's given it to me to use. I'm supposed to take care of it. Moved down to the lake 3 weeks. No, yeah, it was about 3 weeks after we were there. The house burned down, lost everything else. I'm going, well, apparently it's all dust. And it taught me a lesson, right? Early in my marriage. And so when we built the house back, I did have a little bit of insurance. I didn't have nearly enough. I thought I didn't have any. I just had a modest little contents policy. But when we built the house back, we ended up buying the property from the people we were renting it from when we built the house. And the first thing I did was in the fireplace, in brick, put in a cross. And somebody said, well, you know, that might ruin the value of the house, and maybe nobody else wants to buy it. I don't care. I don't care, you know. I want to remind myself every day I walk into the kitchen that this is God's house, period. He owns it. He just let me use it. So that was the stewardship. You're looking puzzled.
No, I'm just thinking.
Well,
I'm thinking of all the things I own that I would prefer to think about myself owning.
Oh, and then the funniest thing about the fire was, there's so many things I learned from it. This is hilarious because my parents didn't argue over custody over the kids when they went through a very difficult divorce. They got legally separated. That was back when you could do that. And about 3 times, and then they moved back, and complicated. Then finally they got a divorce, but they had this Depression era glass that was supposed to be worth a lot of money. And there's one in Henry Ford Museum, a sample of it. So my mother fought because she said, if your dad gets it, he's just going to sell it and keep the money. You can see how they got a divorce. But anyway, so my mother finally gets custody of these Depression era great glasses, you know, and then she divides them out to the 3 of us kids. And what do? I promptly burn them up in a fire. And I thought, now there's a message in there, you know. Were they really that important? They melted, you know, they just melted.
That was a hot fire.
Oh, it was very hot. Yeah, very hot. Literally, we had, there were glass windows in front, and I don't know why they didn't crack, but I guess it was plate glass or something, but they literally melted down like a wax candle.
Wow.
It was crazy. So anyway, but it, you know, all those things, I think if you think back on your own life, there's things that God has taught you. And I think sometimes God just needs very visual examples for me, because I'm kind of a visual person. So I go, okay, I get it, God. But isn't that kind of humorous? I mean, about the glasses? My mother didn't see the humor. So, shall we close with prayer? Lord, we thank you for this group, and as we've been able to share with each other and talk with each other and reflect about the good things that you bring into our lives, especially the good news of Jesus and what you've done for us on the cross. We pray, Lord, that as we ponder the many things that you bless us with, material goods, that you would teach us to use them wisely. And sometimes that's a lifelong journey, Lord, but we just pray that you continue to bless us, teach our hearts the way we should go, and how we can use these things. There's not a book that we can pick up and learn every detail of how we're supposed to manage the wealth you give us, but there is a book that teaches where our heart should be. And so we pray, Lord, that you would continue to be in our lives, that we might use the good things we have for your glory. In your name, Jesus. Amen. Sorry, long prayer. Occupation hazard. As always, thank you for the opportunity to be here.
Thank you.
Check it, right? Except tomorrow, the next 2 days are gonna be good. That's just good, because I haven't cut off my hours on Sunday. Yeah, I'm doing that. It says it's gonna go 7 days. Oh, yes, I'm down in Kirkland. Well, I
Kids all got together.
Oh, thank you, I need it.
Because she was, I shouldn't have.
Yeah, I mean, so it could be.
She gave me, oh, she actually gave me.
Watch.
Yeah, gave me a box of
I got trusted, like, she said I made it for. And then you got,
So, yeah.
Yeah.
She's so nice. I get.
Yeah.
And I found one yesterday.
Thank you.
So it's Roger's sister from Iowa.
Yes.
I ended up bringing.
Okay. But anyway.
Yeah, so, good family.
Yeah,
I didn't know she had all the.
Yeah, you can see it versus any street right there.
But I don't know what it does.
A lot of-
Yeah.